All right, so this is our last chapter about our last section about the business cycle. So I thought it'd be nice to kind of, before I actually get into the details of this chapter, to kind of talk about what we've done so far related to business cycles and where we're going to go with this chapter in particular. So if you think about it, we basically covered three models. So the first one was the real business cycle model. The second one was the sticky prices, nominal rigidities model. And then the third one was this Lucas imperfect information model. Um, and if you recall, the first model, the real business cycle model, that was sort of a real dynamic model. In fact, I didn't say this, but that was actually already a dynamic stochastic general equilibrium model. It was general equilibrium. It was dynamic, right? People were making decisions about how the economy was going to evolve over time. And it was stochastic, meaning random, because there were shocks that were not predictable that would hit households, productivity shocks, well, households and firms. The other two models we looked at, the nominal rigidities model and the Lucas information model, those models were not stochastic. Well, they were not dynamic. They were one-shot models, if you think about it. So if you recall, in the nominal rigidities menu cost model, basically what firms needed to decide was, do you adjust prices or not? Right? It's a sort of a one-time decision. And then for the Lucas information model, what the firms needed to decide was, well, they needed to adjust their production according to a signal that they got, but it was just, again, a one-shot model. So it was stochastic, but it wasn't dynamic. And also, I'm trying to think, was it general equilibrium? No, I don't think it was general equilibrium. So all of the prices, the wages, everything weren't determined altogether in some sort of way so that aggregate supply equals aggregate demand. So, why don't we just use the first one? Why don't we just use the real business cycle model? As I discussed a little bit earlier in previous classes, the reason we don't is because the real business cycle model doesn't have money. And we think that that money has a real effect on the economy, and it's also a policy tool that central banks use in order to smooth out the business cycle. So we want a model where money has an effect, but we also want a model that's sort of more realistic, that's going to explain how the economy evolves over time, and not just something that's going to be a sort of a static one-shot model that's going to help us understand a mechanism, but not give us more insight than that. So that's what we're going to do in this chapter. And this chapter of the book, chapter 7, is quite long, and they talk about a lot of different sort of submodels, different ways you can put in nominal rigidities, sticky prices, in order to generate a more tractable model that you can run then as a more realistic dynamic stochastic general equilibrium model. In the chapter, Romer actually writes several times that these models become very complicated. So in the chapter, they don't sort of go through all of the details of the most state-of-the-art new Keynesian models. Rather, what we're going to do, and what we're going to do this course, is just to write down a very simple and tractable new Keynesian model that's dynamic stochastic general equilibrium, and we'll be able to sort of see the way that money has an effect in this dynamic framework, where we don't sort of detail all of the micro foundations. Rather, we just kind of have these micro foundations going on in the background and then write down a couple of equations that we can sort of just put some parameters in and then plug and chug and see the way that this sort of model works. A nice thing about this kind of model is that actually it's something that's relatively easy for us to simulate. So I might think about doing that for, say, an exercise class. But yeah, so that's the introduction. And before I jump into the actual content, I'm going to stop this video and start a new one.